Here we go. Welcome. My name is G. Welcome to All Astrology. We are going to take, we're not really taking a walk, but we're going to do a deep dive on Jupiter because Jupiter is going to have a retrograde, as did Pisces. And hopefully, you've already seen that video. If you haven't, maybe check it out because Neptune can be a very tricky energy. It's the most beautiful divine planet, but Jupiter has some similar qualities, and we're going to see how Jupiter's meanings are going to change. But if you didn't watch that video, it gives you a breakdown of what a retrograde means. So I'll give a quick recap on the word retrograde. Obviously, the word retro is like we're going to the back. We're going to the past. We're backing up a little bit, right? We're going in reverse. It's like a blast to the past. However, retrograde with planets, when they go retrograde, it's like you've got a seasoning, think of like if you've got some salt and pepper and somebody's put some on the food and then somebody walked away and somebody walks up and they assume it hadn't been seasoned, right? So they just go ahead and they start putting a whole bunch of stuff on it and they're like, and then they go to taste it, right? Yeah, they should have tasted it first. Well, after they've tasted it, or maybe they did taste it first and they thought it didn't have enough, right? Either way, it's like there's an abundance or too much of something, right? It's like we get an extra dose of it. So if we have an extra dose of a planet, it makes sense, right? Because planets literally they radiate like energy. They do, right? It's not just the sun. When you feel the sun rays coming down on you, the planets do the same things, but they do it in their own ways, right? And so when we understand that, it helps us to know like what the heck's going on and why it's going on. And it just it gives understanding. So Jupiter, let's talk about Jupiter. Let's find out, what the hell does Jupiter mean anyway? How will its meanings change when it moves from the sign of Aries back into the sign of Pisces? Yep, that's what's going to happen. And how long is this going to last? Right? So let's take a look. Let's go look at Jupiter. Let's first of all see what the heck the glyph of Jupiter looks like. What is the symbol? And then we'll talk about the meaning. So here's Jupiter. How about this? We'll start with my cursor. So, if you're new, there's my cursor and Jupiter is right here. It's not far. There's Jupiter. And what do? You recognize, if you saw the last video, you recognize that Neptune is right next door to it, right? Yeah. We also learned from the last video how to read this is Jupiter. So yeah, it looks like that fancy number 4. And then we read that as 8 degrees and 43 minutes. And this is the glyph. This is the sign of Aries. That's the symbol for Aries. Same as this one up here. Okay. So we're just going to talk about the meaning of the sign of Jupiter. Simply put, it adds to things. The planet Jupiter, if you were to go ahead and Google it, right? You can take a lot of those things that you read about it, scientific, the astronomy, like its size, and that's what it means. Like, astrology doesn't make this stuff up. A lot of it is scientifically based, and the other parts of astrology are through eons of observation. It's divine knowledge handed down, intuited, and observed. So Jupiter energy, it's big. Jupiter is a gas giant. So when some people have a Jupiter traveling near their ascendant, they gain weight because Jupiter adds to things. Jupiter is big, right? So another thing to know about Jupiter is back in ancient astrology, Jupiter was the planet that ruled Pisces. So when we think of Jupiter, it has a lot of similar meanings as the sign of Neptune. Jupiter, being big, it's a gas giant. So wherever it comes into contact with, it expands upon it. It can even exaggerate a little bit. Yeah, it's known to be an exaggerator. It can be judgments. So it can be like unconscious judgments. Kids are running across their front lawn and they'll say something like, what the hell? They have no home training, right? What's wrong with them? They're disrespectful. They're running across my lawn or whatever. Somebody does something and immediately it's like, oh, this means that. Like there's a judgment made. So there's like possibly unconscious judgments with Jupiter. On the other hand, Jupiter is literally a judge. So when we had the Roe versus Wade, which is interestingly enough, this is the day I'm actually doing this video, the Supreme Court in the United States overturned the case Roe versus Wade, which had set a precedent for over 50 years, where a woman had a right to choose what to do with her body. Jupiter in Aries. Aries is my body. It's your body too. It's your physical appearance and it is your body. But Aries is really more about the freedoms of my body. I shouldn't say more. It's about your appearance, but it's absolutely about this is my body. You cannot tell me what to do with my body. I have the chart pulled up for July 28th because on July 28th, that's when Jupiter at 8 degrees and 43 minutes begins its retrograde. It's religion, it's legislation, it's the courtroom, judicial system, it's spirituality, right? Another common theme with Neptune, it's spirituality. Some consider it the God, the divine energy. Jupiter rules the 9th house in astrology. So it's about your philosophies on life. So philosophies on our body have changed now, right? The philosophies about the freedoms of our body. So what does that mean when we say philosophies? Your beliefs about your body, because it's Jupiter beliefs in Aries. Now, Aries is all about my independent action, right? It's about this is my body. This is sacred. It's me. Jupiter also represents freedoms. It's the freedom of belief. So when we have Jupiter in Aries, it's the freedom and the belief about my body, the actions of my body. And when something goes retrograde, we feel an intensification. We feel more of that same energy. So it's the freedoms of your body being expanded upon. Jupiter is going to expand upon issues about the freedoms of our bodies. That's what we're going to be hearing more about. And the ruling, and that ruling. That's Aries. That's Jupiter and Aries. Doing independent action. I'm doing this because this is what I want to do. This is what's important to me. This is what I believe, right? And so when we talk about the freedoms of one's body, interesting conversations, right? So Jupiter's going to expand upon that. So let's go forward on the chart and we'll go forward in time to see when does it stop retrograding. If I didn't point it out to you, I want to do something really quickly here. When the planets are going, moving forward, the numbers are in black. Okay. You see how they're in black here? And you see how many of these are going backwards in red. Look at this. See all the stuff in red? Look at all the red. This means all of this is going backwards, which means intense times. Yeah, one hot summer, absolutely. A hot and dry summer, by the way. Aries is fiery. Aries is fiery. And Jupiter is expanding in Aries. So yes, a dry, arid summer, absolutely. Red is retrograde. So let's go forward and let's take a peek. There it is. Okay, so it goes back to 28 degrees, 28:48. So here's the cursor again, top right-hand corner. And I'm going to travel over here. And there's Jupiter. It's at 28:48. And this is the first day that it started moving direct, which means going forward. And this is November 24th, 2022. Yeah, so that would be after the elections. So that's July 28th to November 24th. The thing is, what do you see next to Jupiter? You see Neptune. It's at retrograde still. Yeah, because Neptune is a much slower planet. Its retrograde lasts longer. Yeah, it begins retrograding before Jupiter, and it continues retrograding a little bit longer than Jupiter does. The difference now, though, is Jupiter is in Pisces. So there's a change in this Jupiter. It was in Aries. It went to Pisces. I have to actually back up because we need to know when did the change happen. It was retrograding. It was going backwards when it went from Aries to Pisces. Because when that change happens, that's when Jupiter changes. It'll change what it's expanding upon. It'll change the performance. It'll change the theater, the theatrics. It'll change the energy. It's not so much about my freedoms and my independent action of my body. Jupiter becomes more of about prayer and more about politics because it's in Pisces. It becomes more about those Neptune meanings. We're still looking for a date. There it is. Jupiter in Aries at 0 degrees. This is October 27th, 2022. But Jupiter, last day in Aries at 0 degrees, which is the world axis point. So we will hear about something. Let me back it up even more because it stays there for a while. It's something big.